Hi, kindergarten. It's Tuesday, April 28th, and it's story time. So, for today's story, I'm going to read another Curious George book. Curious George Goes Camping. See, he's got the tent, so this should be pretty fun. So, the title is Curious George Goes Camping. The author, right up here, Margaret and H.A. Rays. All right. So far I've read two other Curious George books to you. We have a lot to go through. We've done, let me see, I have them over here. Can you see them over back there? Curious George Goes to the Beach and Curious George Feeds the Animals. So today it goes camping. So what do you think he does when he goes camping? Let's find out. Curious George Goes Camping. This is George. This is George. He was a good little monkey and always very curious. This weekend, George and his friend, the man with the yellow hat, had special plans. They were going camping. So I want you to think about when I'm reading this story to you, all the things that George does and sees when he goes camping. At the campsite, the man with the yellow hat unpacked their gear while George looked at all the tents. He saw tents for big families, one just the right size for a puppy. There were even tents on wheels. Would you like to help me put up our tent, George? The man asked. There's the man with the yellow hat, way over here. George was happy to help. It would not be hard to set up a tent, he thought. But it wasn't easy. George, why don't you fill our bucket with water at the pump? His friend suggested. We need it by our campfire later when we roast marshmallows. Marshmallows. George loved marshmallows. He couldn't wait to try them roasted. Now don't wander off and get into trouble, the man warned. But George did not hear him. He was already gone. Uh-oh, that probably means he's already gone and getting into trouble. At the pump, George worked the handle up and down. There's the pump, right here. Soon his bucket was full. On the way back down the trail, he saw a family packing up. George watched a girl put her bucket of water on a campfire. The fire sizzled out. George thought that looked like fun. He poured his bucket of water on the next campfire. Uh-oh. Hey, yelled a camper. We weren't finished with that yet. The camper began to chase George, but George didn't mean to cause trouble. Now he only wanted to hide. He ran into the forest as fast as he could, but the camper's footsteps followed close behind. George ran faster and faster. The footsteps came closer and closer until suddenly... Oh no, what do you think happened? They passed. They were passing George. Why was not a camper chasing George now? It was a deer. What fun to run with a deer. Forgetting all about the camper and the marshmallows, George ran after the deer. But a little monkey cannot run as fast as a deer in the woods. And before long, George was lost and all alone. He felt tired and stopped to rest. At first he was worried. He was very far from camp. He looks kind of sad, right? Because he's left the man with the yellow hat and he ran away from the camper and then he ran with the deer and now he's all by himself and he's getting a little bit worried. But there were lots of other animals to keep him company. He saw a lizard sunning on a rock and a squirrel chattering in a tree. Then he saw the tail of a black and white kitty peeking out from under a bush. A black and white kitty in the forest? What do you think? Do you think it's a kitty? Let's look a little closer. Do you see... Oops. Right there. Do you think that's a kitty? He was curious. Would the kitty like to play? George gently pulled the kitty out. Oh no, but it was not a kitty. It was a skunk, and it was scared. What do skunks do when they're scared? Psst. They spray a stinky, stinky smell. It was a skunk, and it was scared. The skunk lifted its tail and sprayed. Woof! The spray smelled awful. The animals tried to get away. George wanted to get away too, but he could not. The smell was all over him. Oh, yuck. How would he ever get rid of this awful smell, he wondered. Too bad he could not take a bath in the woods. Uh-oh, look at the little stink spray. Then George had an idea. He could wash the smell off in the creek. George jumped into the cold water. He splashed and scrubbed, but he was still smelly, and now he was wet too. But what could he do? George thought and thought. If he climbed up a tree to dry off, would the smell blow away? Maybe. No, even dry and high up in the tree, George did not smell better. Poor George. He wished he hadn't wandered so far from camp. He wished he were roasting marshmallows with his friend. Suddenly, George heard footsteps heading toward him. Someone was coming. Who do you think's coming? Oh no, it was the forest animals, but they ran right by him. They had seen something scary, and George saw it too. It was a fire. See right back here? George had gotten into trouble for putting out one fire, but this fire wasn't in the campground. This was an emergency. Quickly, George climbed down the tree and grabbed his bucket. He scooped it full of water in the creek. Then, being careful not to spill, he climbed back up in the He climbed back up and swung from branch to branch through the trees, like only a monkey can. When George got close enough to the fire, he reached down and poured the water on the flames. Out went the fire with a big hiss. Just then George's friend rushed out of the forest with the ranger. "George," he called, "I was afraid you would be here." "It's a good thing you were here, George," the ranger said. "We saw smoke from the campground, but you put this fire out just in time." George was glad to help, and the man with the yellow hat was glad to see that George was safe. But he had a funny look on his face. "George," he asked, "what is that smell?" See, George is still kind of stinky. Back at the campsite, George's friend helped him get rid of that awful smell. After a strange bath in tomato juice, George smelled fine. Then the man with the yellow hat invited the ranger to cook dinner with them over their own small campfire. "Fires can be nice if you're careful," said the ranger. Right, always with an adult and always in a really safe spot because you don't want fires to get out of control. Look at all the marshmallows you've got. George agreed, especially for roasting marshmallows. Yeah, that's the best thing to do with a campfire, I think. The end. So I hope you liked that story. I thought that was really nice. I wanted to point out something earlier in this book. So at the campsite, George didn't just turn on a faucet somewhere and get water. See, right here? Oops, right over here. So sometimes when water you can't get out of a faucet, a long time ago they used to have hand pumps, and it would go into a well, and you would just keep doing this crank and pumping, and it would bring the water up and out. Some people, a couple hundred years ago, they actually had these in their kitchen because they didn't have a faucet, and they'd have a pump in their sink in their kitchen, or if they didn't have that, they had to go outside in their yard, and they'd have to pump water with that kind of a crank, and then fill up a bucket and bring that into their house. So It's much better to be able to turn a faucet on and get your water that way, I think. Anyways, so much for history. I hope you like this story. And so what I want you to think about is what did George see when he was camping, all right? So I'm going to write it down in the captions, but the journal entry should be when, which was last week's spelling word, when George went, which was also last week's spelling word. When George went camping, he saw 5 things. And 5 is one of this week's spelling words, okay? And I want you to write that sentence and then write out 1. He saw what? 1 thing did he see? He saw a skunk, right? 2. What else did he see? 3, 4, and 5, okay? Actually, all those, you can write numbers, but you could also write the word for the numbers if you like, okay? Anyways, this is not mandatory, but it's just good practice to write in your journal and practice those spelling words. And then I would love to see your journal, your entry, and post your pictures if you have time, okay? Oh, and the other thing I want to tell you. So Friday, coming up, we're going to have another fun Friday. And this coming Friday, we're going to make twisters. We're going to bake. And this is the list, I'm going to show you right here, of all the items you need, okay? You're going to need flour, you're going to need baking powder, you're going to need salt, you're going to need vegetable oil, you're going to need some milk, you're going to need an egg, okay? And then you're going to need some toppings like shredded cheese or cinnamon sugar or poppy seeds, sesame seeds, Parmesan cheese, anything you like to put. We're making biscuits and then we're going to bake them, and those toppings will either melt or be cooked into your biscuit, okay? And yeah, all right, so I can't wait to see you on Fun Friday, and I will also have this list on that video as well, okay? All right, have a great Tuesday, and I'll see you on Friday. Bye.